The transfer documentation for Cale Doran's reassignment to the Keth Engineering Outpost had been completed 2 days before the transfer date, which was consistent with his approach to transitions. He had done enough of them to know that the paperwork was more manageable when you were not also managing the logistics of leaving, and that the logistics of leaving were more manageable when the paperwork was already done, and that both were more manageable when you had given yourself sufficient time to do each correctly. He had been at Varath Station for 2 years. He had the specific, thorough knowledge of 2 years, the engineering division system architecture, the maintenance cycles, the particular quirks of the station's secondary power grid that were not in the documentation, but were in the knowledge of everyone who had worked with it for more than 6 months. The route from the residential section to the division floor that was 4 minutes faster than the posted route if you took the junction at the service corridor and knew the timing of the freight elevator. He would leave this knowledge in the handover notes and in the institutional memory of the people who remained, which was the correct disposition of things you had acquired through time and were not going to need in the same form at the next posting. The workstation cleared in the order that made the clearing efficient. The personal documentation first, then the technical references that were his rather than the station's, then the specific, small accumulation of 2 years of presence that manifested in the objects people kept at workstations. Not many, in his case, because his erratic schedule had made him practical about what he kept in a space he was not always in. The photograph that was a copy rather than an original, because originals were for places that were permanent, and this had not been permanent. The calibration tool he had bought himself, because the division's standard issue calibrated slightly off and slightly off mattered for the kind of work he did. The plant had been on the workstation for 2 years because he had bought it 2 years ago at the station market for 15 credits, and it had been there ever since, surviving the specific, irregular care of someone who traveled often and worked long shifts, and watered it when he remembered, and did not water it when he did not, and had forgotten it entirely for 3 weeks during the Keth secondary deployment, and come back to find it unchanged, which had confirmed the market vendor's assessment. It was not a beautiful plant. It was a succulent of the common commercial variety, the specific, dense green of leaves that stored their own water, the compact, unremarkable shape of something chosen for its properties rather than its appearance. He had chosen it for one property. It did not require him to remember to care for it in order to survive. He picked it up. He thought about the transit to Keth Outpost, which was a 26-hour journey with 2 station transfers, neither of which were convenient for traveling with a plant, and about the outpost's residential accommodations, which the advanced documentation described as adequate and which his experience of similar postings suggested were the specific, compressed version of adequate that functional efficiency produced. He thought about whether the plant was going to a better situation or a worse one by going with him. He looked across the division floor. Sale Vorkethis was at her workstation in the morning's first shift position, the documentation review that was her current project open on the display, her attention on the display in the specific, divided way he had noticed before nominally on the work, actually somewhere else. He knew the somewhere else was the plant because he had noticed the pattern over the last 6 weeks in the ambient, peripheral way he noticed things in his environment. She had paused near it during the briefings. She had looked at it during the sessions when the shared displays were the nominal subject. He had not asked about the looking because it had not seemed like something that required asking about. People looked at things, and the plant was on the workstation, and the noticing of it seemed like the kind of unremarkable ambient noticing that workstation objects produced. He walked across the division floor. "I'm not going to want to carry this through 2 station transfers," he said, putting the plant on her workstation. "It survived 2 years of my neglect, so it should tolerate anyone's care." "You seem to like it." He was straightening up when her stillness stopped him. She was looking at the plant, not the looking he had observed from across the floor, the divided attention, the peripheral draw of something in the visual field. This was the other kind of looking, the kind that took all of it, the kind that was not divided because the thing that was being looked at had taken the attention that would have been divided and had made it whole. Her hands came up. She lifted the plant from the workstation with the specific, careful quality of something being handled at the level of care, the handling required, not at the casual level of an object being moved. She held it in both hands. She held it the way you held something that you understood the weight of. He stood at her workstation and did not go anywhere, because going anywhere was not the thing to do, and watched her face do the thing that told him the reaction he was watching was not the reaction he had been expecting, and then she began to cry. The crying was not the social kind. The social kind was the kind that came when emotion was present and was being managed to its minimum viable expression, the specific, brief quality of feeling acknowledged and contained. This was the other kind. This came from somewhere that was not accessible to management, from the place that management kept sealed because the seal was structural rather than performative, because some things required the seal to remain functional, and this, whatever this was, had opened the place the seal was on, and what was in it was coming out in the specific, frame-shaking quality of something that had been in there for a long time and was very large. He stood. He did not speak because speaking was not the thing to do. He did not move to leave because leaving was not the thing to do. He stood in the specific, settled presence of someone who had understood that the present moment was the relevant thing and was being present in it, which was not a thing he had been trained to do, but a thing he knew how to do, which were different things, and the second was the one that mattered. The division floor had the specific, ambient quality of a workspace in the morning, the other engineers at their stations, the background sound of systems doing their systems work, the ordinary, indifferent continuation of a working day. No one was looking, or if they were looking in the specific, respectful way of people who had determined that not looking was the correct choice and were executing it. She was crying and holding the plant, and the plant was in her hands. He waited. The words came between the crying and the specific, incremental way of words that were fighting for the space and winning because they had to, because the thing needed to be said, and the saying was the only adequate response to having something to say. "My world," she said. She stopped. She breathed the specific, recovering breath of someone getting the next section. My world was sterilized, in the war. She stopped again. The plant was in her hands and she was looking at it, and the looking was the complete kind. I have not seen living green in 7 years, I thought. She did not finish the sentence. She reached for him instead, the reaching the specific, desperate quality of someone who had arrived at the edge of the available language and had found the only adequate thing on the other side of it was not a word but a person, and he was the person who was there. He held her. He held her in the plain, specific way of someone who understood that holding was what was called for and did it without performing the understanding or managing the manner of it. One hand on her back, the plant between them in her hands, still held with the care she had been holding it with from the moment she lifted it. The frame-shaking quality of the crying continuing, and then, gradually, in the specific, incremental way of things that were very large finding the beginning of a shape, beginning to slow. He did not say anything because there was nothing to say that the holding wasn't already saying. After a while she said, "I am sorry." "Don't," he said, not unkindly. Just plainly, the single word doing what the longer version would have done with more words and less accuracy. She looked at the plant. "The orbital bombardment," she said. 11 months. The assessment documentation says biologically inert. She said the phrase in the specific, flat register of someone who had learned to say a thing in the clinical language, because the clinical language was the version that could be said in spaces where the other version was not available. It means there is nothing alive on the surface, not a bacterium. The atmosphere is wrong now for most life. It would require, the restoration estimates say, between 200 and 300 years with intervention. She paused. "My daughter is 9, she will not see it." He looked at the plant in her hands. He looked at her. "How long have you been off-world?" he said. "Since before the bombardment," she said. "I was stationed here. The posting assignment is the reason I survived, which is—" She stopped. She found the next part. "It is a difficult thing to be the reason." "Yes," he said, "I imagine it is." She looked at the plant. The crying had become the aftermath of crying. The specific, open quality of someone who had been through something and was on the other side of it, and was, for the moment, in the interval that the other side produced before the next thing. "I have been here for 3 years," she said. "I watch." She looked at the division floor, the workstations with their incidental greenery, the casual, ambient plants that were the specific, thoughtless decoration of people who had never experienced a world where decoration of this kind had become impossible. "I watch the humans and their plants. You put them on the workstations and you replace them when they die and you throw them away sometimes and you—" She stopped. She found the even register again. "You do not know what you have. You cannot know, and I cannot tell you. I have tried in the first year to find the words that would let me tell someone who had not lost it what it meant to lose it, and the words do not exist. The thing can only be understood from the inside of the loss." "Yes," he said. "So I watch," she said. "I watch you with the things I cannot have, and it is—" She looked at the plant. "It is what it is. I have learned to manage it." "And then I gave you a plant," he said. She looked at him. Something that was not quite a laugh but was close to one. "And then you gave me a plant," she said. "And I had not prepared for someone to give me a plant. I had prepared for watching. I had not prepared for having." He thought about this. "The archives," she said. "We have archives, images, recordings, the specific documentation of what the world was. The generation born after," she stopped, started again. "My daughter has seen the world in the archives. She has been told what it was. She has the inherited knowledge of something she will never directly know, which is the thing we give the children now, the thing we can give them." She looked at the plant. "She asked me once what green smelled like. I could not answer. The archives do not contain smell. The 7 years have done what they do to sensory memory. I know that it smelled like something and I cannot tell you what." He looked at the plant in her hands. "What do you want to do with it?" he said. She looked at him. "I want to learn how to care for it," she said, in the specific, determined register of someone who had made a decision and was executing it correctly. "It doesn't require much," he said. "Water when the soil is dry to 2 centimeters depth. The weight of the pot tells you when it's light it wants water, when it's heavier it's holding enough. Light, but not direct. What we have in the division is fine." "How often?" she said. "In this environment, probably every 10 to 14 days, he said. "The station's air is dry, which means more often than you'd think. But it will tell you, the leaves get slightly soft when it's waiting too long. You can press them gently." She pressed one of the leaves gently. "Soft now," she said. "It was waiting for me to remember," he said. "I had not watered it in 11 days. She looked at him. "It survived 11 days without water," she said. "It survived 3 weeks during the Keth deployment," he said. "I came back and it had done nothing at all, just sat there." She looked at the plant with the expression he had been learning to read across the conversation. The one that was on the other side of the 7 years. The one that was holding the plant and the history of the plant and the meaning of the plant simultaneously, and was present in all 3 at once. "Your daughter," he said. "How old?" 9, she said. "What shift does she?" He looked at the time display. "I have 4 hours before the transit. My departure clearance is done. The workstation is cleared." He looked at her. "Is she at the educational center?" "Until 1400. Her daughter's name was Myra, and she was 9 years old, and she had her mother's quality of full attention. The complete, unmanaged way of receiving things that her mother had, applied to the world from the vantage point of 9 years of life in enclosed station environments, and the specific, accumulated knowledge of a world she had never been to and knew more about than most people knew about things they had seen. She had been told they were going to the engineering division to see something. She had not been told what. She came into the division floor with the focused quality of a child, managing the correct level of response for an environment she was not certain about. The specific, practiced restraint of someone who had been in enough adult spaces to know that adult spaces had their own rules, and that finding the rules was the first task. She looked at the workstations. She looked at the displays. She looked at Kale in the way of a child assessing an unfamiliar adult, which was thorough and direct in the way that children were thorough and direct when they had not yet learned that thoroughness and directness were things some adults found uncomfortable. "This is administrator work," her mother said. "He works here." "Worked," Kale said. "Today's my last day. I'm transferring to another posting." Myra processed this. "Then we're seeing you on your last day," she said. "Yes," he said. "That seems like good timing," she said. "Or bad timing, I'm not sure which." "I'm not sure either," he said. Her mother was holding the plant. Myra looked at the plant. She looked at it with the specific quality he had not expected, which was recognition. Not the recognition of something seen before, but the recognition of something known, the specific quality of encountering something that matched a description that had been carried for a long time and was now resolving into the thing itself. She had the archives. She knew what this was. She was looking at it with the full weight of knowing what it was and having never seen it as something that was present in the room with her rather than in an image that was present in a display. "Is that a plant?" she said. "Yes," her mother said. Myra looked at it. She looked at it in the complete, still way that her mother had looked at it, the same quality, the same fullness, the specific inherited way of receiving this particular thing that had been transmitted through 7 years of the archives and the telling of what the world had been. "Can I touch it?" she said. She asked this to Kale, not to her mother, which was the correct instinct. It was his plant or had been. "Yes," he said. She reached out with one finger and touched one of the leaves. The specific, tentative contact of someone touching something for the first time that they had only known in description, testing the reality of it, confirming that the texture matched what the knowing had said the texture would be. She looked at her finger. She looked at the leaf. She looked at her mother. "It's real," she said. "Yes," her mother said. Her voice had the specific quality of the even register being maintained carefully. "It's real." Myra looked at the plant. She looked at it with the full attention that her mother had looked at it with, and that Kale had watched from a few meters away for 2 years without understanding what the looking was. And then she said, in the specific, plain way of a 9-year-old for whom the plain version was always the adequate one, "Is this what green is?" Kale looked at the window. The window showed the freight corridor, the container traffic, the transport vessels, the ordinary, indifferent business of the station doing its station work. He looked at it for a moment. He looked back. "Yes," he said. "It's warmer than I thought," Myra said. "In the images it looks cold. Green looks cold in images, but it's not." "No," her mother said. "It's not cold." Myra looked at her finger which had touched the leaf, and then at the plant, and then at her mother. "Are we keeping it?" she said. "Yes," her mother said. "Where will we put it?" she said. "By the window in the quarters," her mother said. "Where the light comes in the morning." Myra considered this. She appeared to be testing the image against the knowledge, the quarters, the window, the morning light, the plant in it. The image resolved into something she found adequate. "Then it will be warm," she said, "in the morning." "Yes," her mother said, "it will be warm." He looked at his transfer clearance timestamp on the personal device. He looked at the plant in Sale's hands and the child who was still looking at it with the complete attention. He looked at Sale. She was looking at him with the expression he had been learning across the morning, the one on the other side of 7 years, the one that was holding the plant and the daughter and the conversation and what the conversation had been, and was looking at him out of the middle of all of it. "Before you go," she said, "does it have a name?" "No," he said, "I didn't name it." "I am going to name it," she said. "That seems right," he said. She told him the name. She said it in her language first, which was the correct way to say it because it had been named in her language and the language mattered, and then she said what it meant in standard for him. The one that came back. He looked at the plant. He looked at Myra, who was looking at the plant. He looked at Sale. "That's a good name," he said. "Yes," she said, "it is." He had the transit to make. He had the transfer clearance and the departure gate and the 26-hour journey to Keth Outpost, the 2-station transfers, the arrival documentation, the beginning of the next posting. He had all of this in front of him in the organized way of someone who had prepared the transition correctly and was ready for it. He said goodbye to Sale in the specific, plain way of someone saying goodbye to a colleague at the end of a posting, which was what this was, and which was also not only what this was, and the plain way held both. He crouched down and looked at Myra. "The leaves," he said, "when they're soft it wants water. You can check by pressing them gently." Myra pressed one of the leaves gently. She looked at him. "Soft now," she said. "A little," he said. "Your mother is going to water it today." "I will remember," Myra said, "about the softness." "Good," he said. "It will be important." He stood. He picked up his transfer bag, which was all that remained from the cleared workstation. He looked at the plant in Sale's hands. The dense, unremarkable green of a succulent that had been chosen for durability rather than beauty, that had been on his workstation for 2 years surviving the irregular care of someone who traveled often, that had cost 15 credits at the station market. The one that came back. He looked at Sale and then at the window and then at the transit corridor that led to the departure gate. He went. The educational center served dinner at 1700, which was the time Myra was supposed to be there on division workdays. But Sale had sent a message to the administrator when they left the engineering division, and the administrator had filed the absence as an approved family activity day. Because the administrator understood the category, even when the category was not in the formal documentation, which was the kind of thing good administrators did. They went to the station's small park. Not large, not natural in the way that parks were natural on worlds where parks were natural, but a contained, managed space with the specific, careful quality of green things maintained in an environment that did not produce them without maintenance. Myra walked through it with the plant cradled in both hands, held the way her mother had held it, the inherited quality of the care. She looked at the plants in the park. She looked at the ones in their beds and the ones in the containers and the trailing ones on the support structures, the specific, varied range of growing things that the maintenance team kept alive in the station's controlled environment. "Why do they have all of these?" Myra said. "The humans," Sale said. "Yes." Sale thought about the answer that was accurate. "Because they come from a world where there are very many more," she said. "And they need them in some way, even when they are not on that world. It is how they are made." "Do they know they need them?" Myra said. "Not usually," Sale said. "They know it the way you know things that have always been present. You do not notice the having of them until they are not there." Myra considered this. She pressed one of the leaves of the plant she was holding gently. "Still soft," she said. "We should water it when we get back." "Yes," Sale said, "we should." They sat on the bench by the park's small water feature, which was not a natural water feature, but had the sound of one. The specific, ambient quality of moving water that the park's design had determined was important enough to include. The plant was in Myra's hands. The light was the station's evening cycle light, which was not sunlight but was warm in the way that the station's environmental systems had been designed to make it warm. Myra looked at the plant. "Will it grow?" she said. "Yes," Sale said. "Slowly. These ones grow slowly." "How much?" "Enough," Sale said. "Enough that you will be able to see it is bigger than it was if you look after some months." Myra held the plant and looked at it in the complete way she had been looking at it since the engineering division. "What did our world look like?" she said. "The green parts, not the archives. What did it look like to you?" Sale sat with the question. She had been sitting with this question, in the specific interior way of someone who held a question, because they had not yet found the answer that was accurate enough to give, for 7 years. "There was a quality to it," she said. "A green that was not one thing. The archives capture the color but not the quality. The way it moved when there was wind. The way light came through the leaves of large trees, the light on the other side of the leaves being a different green than the light on the facing side. She stopped. The smell which I cannot describe, which is the part I cannot give you. Myra was quiet. I will try to remember, she said, what this one smells like so I can tell my children. Sale looked at her daughter. She looked at the plant in her daughter's hands. Yes, she said, that's a good thing to do. Myra brought the plant up closer and smelled it. The small, careful smell of a child conducting a precise investigation. She held the smell in the specific, attending way of someone who was going to need to remember it. She looked at her mother. Earthy, she said, and a little bit like rain, but dry, both at once. Yes, Sale said. She did not know if this was accurate. She did not have the memory to compare it against. It did not matter whether it was accurate because what Myra was doing was not accuracy. It was the specific, particular act of paying the kind of attention that things deserved, and the thing deserved it, and she was doing it. Earthy and a little like rain, but dry, Myra said. I will remember. Yes, Sale said, remember. The park was quiet in the way of small parks on stations. The contained, managed quality of a space that was doing what it could with what it had, which was not a world but was not nothing. The water feature made its sound. The evening cycle light was warm. Myra held the plant. Sale looked at the plant in her daughter's hands, the small, dense, unremarkable green of a succulent that had been on a human engineer's workstation for 2 years, chosen for its durability rather than its beauty, given away as the casual gesture of someone who had somewhere to be and had noticed that someone seemed to like it. The one that came back. She thought about Cale Doran, who was on the transit to Keth Outpost, who had rearranged 4 hours of a departure schedule because the departure schedule was not the relevant factor, who had crouched down and told her daughter about the softness of the leaves and that it would be important to know. She thought about what he had not known when he picked up the plant from the cleared workstation. What the plant was, what the giving of it was, what it would mean to put it in the hands of someone who had been watching the humans and their plants for 3 years, with the specific, quiet discipline of someone who had learned to watch things they could not participate in. He had not known. The not knowing had been the specific condition that made the giving what it was. The giving had been casual in the way of someone who was not doing something significant. The significance had been on the other side, the side that held the 7 years and the archives and the daughter who asked what green smelled like and could not be answered. She had been the one who knew what it was. He had been the one who gave it. Both were necessary. She looked at her daughter who was looking at the plant. Outside the small park, the station was the station, the freight corridor, and the transit lanes, and the ordinary, indifferent machinery of a place that moved things between worlds and had no particular feelings about what those things were or what they meant to the people receiving them. 3 corridors and 2 levels away, in the space that had been the Engineering Division's Workstation 12, a small rectangle of cleared surface showed where the plant had been, which would be cleaned in the morning shift and would show nothing, and would look like every other cleared workstation surface, and would be what it was. Myra pressed the leaf. Still soft, she said, still waiting.